You are listening to the Cultural Providers Network podcast, a Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health production, building and sustaining a network of culturally and ethnically diverse voices to promote policies, practices, standards, and research that improve the mental health of children, their families, and communities.
This podcast is brought to you by the Minnesota Department of Health. Perfect. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Cultural Providers Network podcast. I am your host, Brandon Jones, and this podcast is brought to you by Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health. We have our guest today, who is Moua, who is a licensed mental health professional, licensed marriage and family therapist, more specifically, and we're going to have a good conversation about culture, about the field of mental health and healing and what that looks like in various different communities. Maria, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well today, Brandon. Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So to kick off the podcast, we're going to start really simple. Could you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, maybe even why you got into the field of mental health.
Sure. I'm a first generation born Hmong, born in the United States from Hmong immigrant parents who came here as refugees during the Vietnam War. And I've always been passionate about helping our community, improving our community, and just seeing that psychotherapy or helping people on a therapeutic level has always been a lack or need in our community. And I just felt really strongly on becoming the type of person that I needed growing up, and really providing that for our younger generation.
Absolutely. I share a lot of the same sentiments. As a former clinician myself, those are really the reasons why I got into it too. You know, my own experiences and then also wanting to help my community. Can you tell us a little bit more about your personal experiences? Whether was there a specific moment or an event where you were like, man, I really need to dive into this world of therapy to help people from a mental and emotional health standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, the Hmong community has a long history of intergenerational poverty, persecution, and therefore lack of education and resources. And it was very traumatic for them to relocate from Southeast Asia, primarily Laos and Thailand, to come to the United States. And As a result, the Hmong community in general has a lot of dysfunctions and toxicity, abuse, domestic abuse. In the family system that is often normalized or recognized as part of the Hmong culture. And growing up as a child, observing this myself, noticing this in my own family and in the Hmong community, um, I just knew that it wasn't okay, that this wasn't healthy, and that this wasn't normal. And I just had, as a young kid, I just had an innate knowledge or understanding of how normative or healthy family relationship dynamics are supposed to be. And it wasn't until I was much older that I could seek counseling services for myself. So it wasn't until I was in college that I finally had the freedom and the independence to receive counseling services that what I knew deep within was confirmed. And that gave me um, the confidence or the desire, the passion to want to continue to provide those services in the Hmong community, in the community in general, but also specifically the Hmong community.
Yeah, I'm a kid from St. Paul, and I grew up in the Frogtown area. And I remember my early years. I was probably in the second and third grade is when I really started to see a huge influx of Hmong folks into the community. I used to go to Como Elementary School, and I remember when it was a
Oh,
complete shift. And I
yeah.
remember it was like we had like no Hmong kids, And then like one year, it was just like an explosion of Hmong kids. And what the Hmong kids brought to our school was soccer. No one ever played soccer, and all of a sudden these Hmong kids come, and we're having these massive soccer games. It was like 30 kids on 30 kids playing soccer. It was the best. Some of my best childhood memories are playing soccer with a bunch of Hmong kids. And another thing I remember was the change in the neighborhood. All of a sudden, it was like we used to have stray dogs and cats, and then chickens just showed up, and then there were just like chickens in our community. So you would see a dog and a chicken just kind of hanging out. It was awesome. So, I've always had a nice space in my heart for Hmong community, and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand, and neither did the adults. And I remember, and I'm gonna share a quick story. I remember the adults, and I think this happens anytime you have cultures that kind of collide. I remember the adults being very, very discriminatory towards Hmong people. They didn't know. They thought that they were Chinese. They would say, "Oh, those people doing karate," and they would just say these things that they had no idea about who Hmong people were. But it was the adults, the kids. We usually got along for the most part. It was a very fascinating experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of stories that I can share myself that I can relate to. I grew up, I was born and raised in South Minneapolis for a good portion of my childhood. And yeah, so I grew up, but the interesting thing is my parents worked full time. They both worked for Hennepin County.
Okay.
And so, I would be watched as a young kid by my grandparents, and they lived in the projects in North Minneapolis. So I actually got a taste of
Yep.
both South Minneapolis culture and North Minneapolis culture.
Yeah.
And so there's always a part of me that has a soft spot, and I'm a Minneapolis girl deep
Yeah.
down in my
Absolutely.
blood. And then in college, I went to Northwestern College, now University of Northwestern, as well as for grad school, I went to Bethel University, or
Yeah.
Bethel Seminary to be specific. And so I spent my early adult years in St. Paul, so I feel like I have a good
Yeah.
gauge of both
Yeah.
Minneapolis and St. Paul culture.
Absolutely. That's awesome. That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the cultural factors that may impact mental health or therapy from a Hmong perspective? Are there any? Are there any unique things that people should be aware of?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, as I started to learn more in grad school about marriage and family therapy, and I started understanding how do family systems work. One of the uh, types of family systems that really stood out to me was learning about narcissistic family systems, right? And understanding how does that come into play. And it wasn't actually until later on, I didn't realize at the time how that mirrors the Hmong. I have to specifically say more of the Hmong American perspective. We can definitely talk more globally, but I'm going to be a little bit specific today and talk about the Hmong American perspective, because that in itself is a unique phenomena, and I can explain
Absolutely.
that a little bit later too. But essentially, just to kind of explain it, so the Hmong culture is based on hierarchy. It's a patriarchy type of system where the eldest father, the eldest male member of the family, is on the top of the hierarchy. They have the final say. And but because the Hmong culture does not have a standing country that we identify with or that we can call our home, we don't have a governing system, um, like a government system that actually keeps us accountable. So who keeps the eldest male in the hierarchy accountable? Nobody does. And so when nobody keeps the person on top accountable, they can pick and choose. They can cherry pick and choose whatever they want out of the culture. It's human condition to be selfish, especially if you can take advantage of something without um, being held accountable. So they can cherry pick and choose anything in the culture that they feel would benefit them, and then they use that knowledge to pass down to the next generation. And because we don't have a governing system, which means we don't have a library. We lost our language for quite a while. It wasn't until the 1950s that we got back our written language. Um, and so then, a lot of us are not even literate, right? So then we don't have like actual knowledge or passing down of our culture. So then we just take things by the word of the person that's above us, and all we have is a fraction of what benefits them. So in those kind of terms, that is very narcissistic in the family term, because it's all centered around one person in power who gets to decide what everyone else should know or believe. And we kind of call it a joke. When I say we, I say, oftentimes the younger people, because how this affects us is like, for example, let's say we're having an engagement party where the young man is coming to the young woman's house. Typically, that's how it goes, and then they're working on being officially engaged. And so they have to talk about the dowry, they have to talk about the cultural arrangements and how things are going to come to play. And then everybody usually comes to a civil agreement, right? That's the ideal. But then, in walks in the door. It's almost kind of like a drama series, but in walks in the door the elder uncles, and the elder goes, "Not so fast." And then they all of a sudden start spouting, "You owe me $2,000. You gotta give." No, that's not okay. We have to do it this way. And it's just like, where did that come? Like, and then all of a sudden, like, there's infighting and there's drama. It's just like, man, who invited the old person to to ruin it for?
Yeah,
But that's kind of the joke, that there's a I'm trying to keep this lighthearted, but that's a common issue
yeah,
of like how uh, the Hmong culture struggles systematically, and it's a taboo to say this. I know that a lot of people are probably not going to be happy to
sure.
hear that I'm sharing this, but I think that as a community, the sooner that we can acknowledge some of our deeply rooted problems at its core, then we can actually look towards the actual solution to healing from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It takes a lot of courage to one, be a person who is willing to say those things publicly about some of the what we call in-house things in the African American community, and airing out the dirty laundry. But some of that needs to happen in order to make the appropriate shifts for the people to be healthy. And I see the same thing in the African American community. There's a lot of things that we never talk about publicly, and those are
Mhm.
some of the most damaging things that are happening within our own community and family dynamics. You talked a lot about some what the industry term is intersectionality between the patriarchy, some gender role pieces. Are there anything around class that affects the Hmong community? Where is there anything around like social economic status or anything that you've noticed that impacts their mental and emotional health?
Yeah, so I actually provide a cultural competency training, um, that I offer to talk about these things. And in the training, one of the things I do talk about is, class can be a factor, but not necessarily. Uh, you know, I think it's a human condition to say that class is a factor, right? Depending on what's your status in the family, who are you related to, what's your economic status. Um, the unique thing about the Hmong culture is, uh, I hate to put it this way, but um, we can be very brutal in the culture. Some people would use this term that we can be very ghetto minded, and what I mean by that is that, um, you know like I said, I grew up in the ghetto because my grandparents were in the ghetto. So I understand that culture, right? It's like, I don't care what your class is, it's all about respect. If you don't understand the street, if you don't understand the street culture, if you don't understand how to respect people, then we don't respect you, right? So it's really interesting that in the Hmong culture, we have that kind of same mentality of like, it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, it doesn't matter what bloodline you are, if you don't understand our type of street culture, if you don't understand how to engage with us at our level, we can take advantage of you. We can look down on you. We don't respect you. And so there is a very big importance about having your wit and being sharp and understanding, being educated, well adverse, and understanding the Hmong culture. And the funny thing is, the Hmong culture, the way that the Hmong American people identify it today, is not actually the real original Hmong culture. And so, uh, we do a lot of claiming that this is the Hmong culture, but what happened, and I'm sorry, I'm deviating a little bit, Brandon, from
No,
from
you're
your
fine.
question, but I
Keep
feel like I
rolling.
have
You're
to be
good.
comprehensive here. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So basically, when we were removed from Southeast Asia, specifically Laos, and came here, that's not the first time that we were removed from a country. That's the second time. So the Hmong people originated in southern China, and when China wanted to become one nation and to claim every ethnicity to be Chinese, the Hmong people rebelled, and they didn't want to be identified as ethnically Chinese, and so we were actually excommunicated in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and we got pushed down all the way down to Southeast Asia, where now we see it as Thailand, Vietnam, and Laos. And so, uh, so then, in the 1970s, when we fled Laos and came here to the United States, you know, uh, we have some grandparents who can remember their parents, right? Their grandparents being removed, right? So that trauma, that double trauma, is being removed twice. So we have this really weird phenomena, specifically here in the United States, where the Hmong people, anything that remotely feels or sounds like it's the Hmong culture, even if it's dysfunctional, they latch onto it very strongly. And this is a phenomena that's not true for the Hmong people in Laos, in Thailand, in China. And how do I know this? Because I've been there. I've traveled to Laos, Thailand, and China. I've interviewed the Hmong people there, and they don't have a problem assimilating. The elders talk, and they say, yeah, the kids are gonna learn the language of the people around it. It's okay. But for some weird reason, and I think the reason why is because the United States is not an Asian country, right? So they got removed. They came to a predominantly white country, totals opposite ends of culture. And so then they froze in time on refusing to continue or assimilate, and they just kept everything as this is very, very Hmong. And that's very crippling for us, because now we have lost the mother tree. And so my long-winded explanation here is trying to get to this point, that what the Hmong American people call the Hmong culture now is not really true. It's a face, it's a porcelain face of what we truly are, because we actually are struggling with a psychological phenomena as a people group right now. But if you actually look back to the mother tree, which is Confucianism dates back 3000 BC. It's pretty darn old. If you talk to any Central Asian, Southeast Asian, pretty much they can relate their culture back to Confucianism, which is a philosophy. And the most interesting thing is, it's in our DNA. When I talk to our elders, when they spout dysfunction and toxicity and say, this is part of the Hmong culture, and I say, well, actually, Confucianism states X, Y, and Z, they will go, oh, yep, you're right. But I'm old and I don't want to change. So it's like, all right, but I got you. I got you to accept and understand that what you're spouting is you know, false doctrine. It's not really who we truly are. And so what I want to do as a mental health specialist is I actually want to help people to not just know the culture and nod their heads and accept that that's what it is, and it really sucks to be you, because that's what I'm seeing right now with a lot of providers. What I rather do is say, hey, we don't have to be this. we can actually go back to our mother tree. We can actually be more. We can elevate ourselves, or in the Buddhist religion, they call it, you can have enlightenment, right? In the psychological terms, we call it differentiation, right? You can be more well differentiated, uh, so that you don't have to stay stuck here. You don't have to live in the ghetto mentality. You don't have to live in mental poverty for the rest of your life.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. That context is very, very important to really understanding this Hmong American community that has grown and continues to grow, especially in a place like Minnesota. Are there other pieces of this phenomenon outside of the one that you just shared that you think is important for people to know about?
Um, I'm not really sure if I understand your question, Brandon. Can you expand
Yeah.
it a little bit? Yeah.
Absolutely. So earlier you mentioned that there's a Hmong American phenomenon that takes place. You said I can cover that later. I think you were kind of just covering a good chunk of it now. Was that
Mhm.
what you were referring to, or is there more to this Hmong American experience that is happening? Like, for example, one thing I'm curious about, and this is from a person who's not a part of the Hmong culture, is the generational difference. Like, I believe Hmong folks are in their third or almost fourth generation being American.
Mhm.
If I'm accurate with my
Yeah.
timing, I'm assuming that there may be some differences there just based on a simulation of what I know about culture. Are there any other phenomenon that take place around Hmong American identity?
Yeah, I'll specify it a little bit. So what's really interesting is, I feel like I always have to kind of explain a little bit before I get to my point, but
That's fine.
that,
That's
that's how
okay.
it is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll do
because
that.
yeah, because not a lot of people know this. I mean, even I didn't know this until I went to college and then in grad school, right? And so if we look at American history, of the first Asian people that came here, they were the Chinese and the Japanese, right? They helped side by side with the black,
Yep.
community to build the
Yep.
railroads, right?
Yep.
So so by the time the Chinese and Japanese community reached their fourth generation, their language was lost. They became
Mm,
completely assimilated. I mean, completely assimilated way of, they became Americanized, right? Because that's
right.
just how it is.
The process. Yeah.
Um, and so we're reaching that as a Hmong community. The difference here, though, is that Japanese people and Chinese people have a home country to go back to, right? So their kids, not Hmong, Japanese American, Chinese American kids can always go back to Japan. They can always go back to China and go, there's my roots, there's my country, there's my language, right? Most people don't have that. You know what we have? We have movies that we dubbed
Ah.
illegally. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
we that's all we have. Or we can go back to uh, Laos, which my husband and I did. We went back
Yeah.
there because that's where my parents were born. But I'll be honest with you, all of the Hmong teenagers, or the young people who
Yeah.
are younger than me, they don't even speak Hmong as well as I do, and I'm
Oh wow.
shocked because I
Yeah.
thought I thought my Hmong wasn't that good, right?
Yeah.
And because Laos, they speak Lao, that's the
Mhm.
native tongue. They speak Lao like we Hmong people speak English now.
Mm,
My husband and I, we primarily speak English to each other.
sure.
And so my kids hardly, they hardly know Hmong, and unfortunately, that's just kind of how it is. But
Yeah.
um, that's the sad part. That's the hard. So I understand. I want to empathize that. I understand that this is why the Hmong people are, and the Hmong Americans are so frozen and saying anything that feels remotely Hmong, we're gonna claim it, right? But then we keep the dirty bathwater with the baby. So then uh, domestic abuse, especially um, you know uh, male husbands abusing their wives and children. Abuse is okay. I mean, really, it's condoned. Infidelity is condoned. It wasn't until the late no early 2000s, I think, or the late 1990s, that the United States finally caught on that the Hmong people were still kidnapping young girls and forcing those girls to marry their kidnappers. And I think the United States, you know, realized that this was still happening in our culture and that we were condoning it, and so they made a law that you're not allowed to do that. And basically, I think there was, to some degree, they were saying like, if you're not a legal citizen, you'll be deported. If you're going to kidnap a bunch of underage girls and force them to marry you, because that's by the way, that's still happening. Behind closed doors, right?
Wow.
Um, and then even Hmong men now, even younger than me, are still going back to Laos, because in Laos, with your middle class or even lower middle class paycheck, you can be a millionaire. You
Wow.
can act and live like a millionaire. So here's a very sad story, and I hope this guy hears this story, because I hope he knows who he is. My husband and I were on a plane to Laos, and on this journey to Laos, you have to stop in Thailand, and from Thailand to Laos. So this is a very long trip. From the
Mhm.
United States, there's this guy that is joking with his like buddies. Like, I think he had 2 or 3 buddies. I can't remember. And he was talking very loudly the whole way, mocking that he has a wife with kids. Like, I think he had like 4 or 5 kids. And he was going to spend 3 months in Laos so that he could spend time getting married to a girl in a remote village, paying a $100 dowry, and he would sleep with her for 1 month, go to another village, do the same thing, sleep with her for 1 month, go to a third village and sleep with her 1 month, and then come back home and never talk to them ever again. And these girls have no idea that they're prostituting themselves, and their parents are poor, their parents are desperate. And he goes, I love doing this every year, you know. And then he's like, yeah, come with me. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna and the saddest thing is, this is known in the Hmong community. The
Wow.
wives are not happy, the children are not happy, the sons are not happy, right? They have family meetings,
Sure.
and guess what? The elders condone it, or they
Let
say
us.
it's not okay, but they don't do anything about it. Why? Because the elders are doing it too.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's news to me. I've never heard of that phenomenon, and I'm not surprised that I haven't heard of it, because it seems like one of those cultural things that you don't let out the community. We deal with it. We try to deal with it internally, but it just doesn't leak out. I was familiar with Hmong people not really having that home country, and I learned that a little over a year ago. And I was like, man, this is the first time I found another ethnic group who reminds me of African American folks
Yeah.
who we we don't. I mean, we have a continent that we associate ourselves with, but
Right.
there are 53 countries on that continent.
Yes.
So we don't have a home, but we do. It's here. And I think that due to experiencing racism and stuff, we don't always identify with it. But yeah, that's a fascinating dynamic with some of the Hmong males who are doing that. That wow, I had no idea. It's scary, actually. It's very
Shocking, right?
scary. Yeah,
Yeah, and
it's very.
these girls are underage girls. I mean, they're prostituting, raping underage girls, and these are men that live here in the United States that have wives and kids.
Yeah.
Guess who come to therapy? It's their sons that come to
Wow.
therapy. It's their daughters that come to therapy. It's their wives that come to therapy. It's never them.
Yeah.
And they cry and they weep and they say, what do we do and how do we do it? And
Yeah.
one of my soapboxes, Brandon, is I want to help mental health providers to stop being uh, kind of apathetic about it.
Right. Right.
Because I think that if you're not a monk provider, you're shocked and you're not aware, right? And
Hmm.
so that's why I'm here, right? Because I
Hmm.
want providers to be aware. If you are a monk provider, you're not shocked, you are aware, but you're kind of apathetic because you go, well, I'm part of the matrix.
Yeah.
I don't know how to break out of it.
Hmm.
And I'm here to say, yes, you can break out of it. Yes, we can do something about it. Um, and we can actually do it in a culturally appropriate way.
Right.
Actually, we can do it in a culturally appropriate, in a radical way,
Hmm.
right? In a way that makes us enlighten ourselves. I use the metaphor in my cultural competency training of the Mekong River, right? The Black American culture, they have their metaphor of freedom by the Mississippi River. We have our metaphor of freedom by the Mekong River. because in Laos, the Mekong River was the river that you needed to cross to get to freedom. And a lot of people died in that river. And so I use that as a metaphor to say we have a metaphoric Mekong River that we need to cross as a people group to get to a higher level of understanding and freedom from these things that we have told ourselves that this is part of the culture and it's okay. But no, if you, again, I don't mean to be a ringing gong here. If you go back into Confucianism, if you look at how, why is it a philosophy that has lasted for thousands of years, right? Because it works in the Asian system. It doesn't work in the Western system, but it works in the Asian system, which we are, right? And so if we see that and if we honor that, and if we actually reconnect ourselves back to the mother tree, then we can actually release some of these things, the toxicity. We can take the bath water out from the baby and say, wait a second, that's not really who we are. Let's really adopt who we truly are.
Wow, it's amazing. Can you share a little bit more about some of the things that non-Hmong mental health providers should know or should be curious about when working with Hmong clients or patients? Are there any things that they should pay attention to or to ask
Yeah.
or to be curious about? Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, Brandon, that's a very broad question.
Yeah, I know.
ask.
I'm looking for a couple things, you know.
So, but I appreciate that because you're giving me space, but then it's like a freeway, so I have to kind of
Sure.
like in
Pick
my
a
mind, I'm like,
lane. Yeah.
all right, I'm gonna pick the top two things in my mind that I really want to talk about.
Yeah, we don't expect you to answer all the things.
Right.
Some things like, you know what? It'd be good for these folks to know this. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to, Brandon. Honestly, I want every question that you ask me. I genuinely want to give you a full 50-minute answer for
Sure.
every question, but I know we don't have the time, right?
Take the time you need. Take the time you
Right.
need. Go for it.
Yeah. Maybe you'll have to invite me back another time and
Oh, absolutely. I think I
finish
am. I'm enjoying this conversation. I've learned a lot.
Good. So yeah, so to specify at least one or two. So if I was going to give you my best one or two balls to hit, right? I'm going to say that take notice when your patient or your client, however you want to identify them, is educating you, spending a good majority of the time educating you about their culture, because that's not fair to them. You know, it's their time, it's their money, it's their clock. If they're sitting there and you're going, wait, can you explain that? Can you help me understand why is that? And you're recognizing that they're spending a good majority of their time trying to help you understand their culture. That's the time to kind of pause for a second, because that's, again, like I said, I'm repeating myself here, that's not fair to your patient to spend so much time to be your teacher. That's not what they're paying you for, right? And so if that starts becoming the case, I would strongly invite you to, I want to really encourage you to come and contact me. I love consulting with people. I love helping people that want to help the community. The more of us, the better. And um, I take some notes. If there's something that you don't fully understand, call me, contact me. I'm happy to sit down and chat with you. Chat with a colleague that is also Hmong. But I want to be specific too. Just because you're a Hmong provider, I hate to say it, it doesn't make it enough. We shouldn't just solely rely on our life background to provide appropriate care, right? Just because I'm a mother, I don't solely rely on my experience as a mother to provide you parent coaching care, right? I have to get the training for it. I have to get the research for it. I have to actually, um, genuinely care and do extra work to understand it. And that's what I've done, right? And so that's my soapbox to providers of color, to Hmong providers. We can't be lazy, right, in the care that we provide. So make sure to my non-Hmong colleagues, to make sure that when you're consulting with a Hmong colleague, that they actually know what they're talking about, that they're not apathetic, that they're not shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, that's just how the culture is. That's not a good enough answer for me. So do your research. Make sure that your patient is not educating you. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not know everything. I don't know everything when I'm working with a patient who is a different culture from me, but I do try to be a very good student in taking notes and not asking too many questions, making sure that I'm present with them, and then I take my time and do my research so that I can be more competent the next time and that they don't have to explain themselves so much. Does that make sense, Brandon?
Absolutely,
Good.
absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And it makes me go to some of the pre-conversation we had before we started recording.
Hmm.
And I would love to pick your brain a little bit about just our field in general, and not necessarily, looking at Hmong community specifically.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I think that the mental health world has a lot of space to grow. And I think the pandemic has probably forced us to really take a critical look at how we do therapy, because a lot of people's response to the pandemic was, I need to talk to somebody. I need therapy. I want it was like I know in the mental health world, we've always wanted people to come to therapy. It's been that kind of tug of war of getting people to come. Pandemic happens and everyone's saying, I need to talk to someone. We weren't
Yes.
ready, right? We don't there's wait lists all across the country. There's still people on wait lists. Our crisis services are, busting at the seams. We don't have enough of anything but medications at this point. And it's it's like we've been forced 5 years ahead of time, but we weren't prepared. We know we don't have enough providers of color. We don't have enough providers, period.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts and on this field, and what are some things that we should be considering as we move forward and we try to help heal communities?
Man, Brandon, you keep giving me those big, broad questions, and I like it to be a little bit more narrow, a little bit more specific.
I I can try to narrow it down for you if you
Yeah,
want me to.
yeah. Can you? Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be great.
absolutely, absolutely. So earlier I was speaking a little bit about how the mental health world has not advanced much over the last, let's I'll say 60 years. We still use a lot of the old theories. We use a lot of the old perspectives,
Mhm.
but we know that the world has shifted and changed a lot, especially when it comes in terms of culture. So when I think about that,
Mhm.
and I think about also everybody wants to come to therapy, part of my mind goes, is there a way for us to be a little bit more creative at serving our communities? Because some stuff is just not working.
Mhm.
Have you come across any thoughts or approaches
Yeah,
that you're like, hey, we should really consider these things to help heal communities? Is that narrow enough?
absolutely,
All right,
absolutely.
perfect.
I mean, I have a couple of things in mind. The first thing in mind is that then we need to update those theories, right? But with respect to those theories, because those theories have some grounded truth and long-term evidence-based practice. That's wonderful. We need to update those theories, and that's why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. Um, I co-founded the Hmong Marriage and Family Therapy Support Group. Since the pandemic, we've been primarily a virtual support group on Facebook, but before that, we had quarterly meetings, if not monthly meetings, in person. And one big reason that I founded the group was primarily for that. I wanted to, and I still do, to create a new theory that was adding on to the marriage and family therapy modality, and to create one that was more appropriate for uh, specifically the Hmong community, but also can connect to the larger Asian community, and then uh, people of color as well. And so that's why I'm sharing the stuff that I'm sharing now, because to be honest with you, I don't know anyone else that's really uh, as uh, as interested or talking about the same things that I'm talking about right now. I'll be honest with you, I've talked to so many people, executive directors, I've talked to doctors, I've talked to leaders in other nonprofit agencies, and and these are Hmong people, by the way, who've been in the field way more longer than I have. And I talked to him about this new theoretical model about how do we approach the Hmong community culturally in a culturally appropriate, radical way that um, can actually uplift us into a higher level of understanding and care. And every answer I got from them is, I've never thought of that. That's a new insight. I've never considered that. So I'm like, why am I the only one? So, so that's the thing, is like, we need to start taking responsibility of creating and applying a new theoretical model into our communities. We know our communities best. So the pressure is really on us providers right now today, the ones that are doing the work that we do. On the other side, though, I have a lot of compassion for us, because we've been the trailblazers our whole life. We're burnt out, man. We are so we're so burnt out, because we've been taught from the beginning, you're the key to change the community. So we are in my cultural competency training, I talk about the super, not just the hero, the superhero complexity that this generation has. When I say this generation, I'm talking about the generation that's been really pushing through, plowing through, right? And so, like, we're not doing just heroic level kind of work and changing our community. We're doing super heroic level. And so it's like, there's so much more to do, but I don't know how much more we can take too, right? So that's the struggle, right? Because we know that there needs to be a modality that's being incorporated, but nobody has the time, because everybody's trying to do everything else, right? And so that's the struggle that we have right now, of like, okay, sometimes we need to make a conscientious decision of, what do I want to prioritize for this community? How do I want to have my little, little tiny match and spread the flame? These kind of conversations are awesome, Brandon. I'm so glad that you guys are having this, because my hope is there's going to be someone else out there that hears today's conversation and go, I'm really interested in that. I want to sit down and have a conversation and talk about this more. And I truly want to start applying this in the work that I do. And then when somebody else applies it, and we get back together and we talk about it and said, it worked. It worked. Or hold on, Maria, what do you do when you get caught in this situation? Right. And then I say, oh, you know what? This is what I've tried. This is what I've done. Right. Because I'll be honest with you, Brandon, I don't have time right now to go back to school to get that PhD, to do all that. It's great if other people do, but I have my priorities. So I'm like, you know what? I'm a practice person. I'm going to do the work right now, even if it's not necessarily recognized right now, but it works. And I'm sorry, but I don't have time to write it down somewhere and to make it into a doctoral thesis, because this needs to be applied right now. And that's just me. Maybe somebody else will take this ideology that I'm talking about, and they can go to grad school, they can get their PhD, and use this and make it into a doctoral thesis. That's awesome. But this is, the world is on fire, and we need fire trucks that are spraying right now, right? And that's my calling. That's my role. Did I help answer that, Brandon?
Absolutely, absolutely. That was amazing. And I feel you. I'm right there with you. I'm one of those people who has some thoughts on how to shift the African American community, and I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm doing so much now to make an impact today that
Yeah,
I try to even invest some of my time in mentoring others to keep going forward and
exactly.
encouraging them, keep pushing this forward, because we need all the help that we can get to make the changes that we want to make.
Mhm.
My final question for you is, how can people get in contact with you? Do you have a website, or is there any specific social media channels that you want people to connect with you on? How can we find you?
Sure. So they can find this video on my YouTube site, and they'll find it here, and as well as on your site as well. They can contact me through my website as well, which is Moua Therapy .com, and that's how you'll find me there. You can get my contact information there. You can email me there, connect with me there, and I'm really hoping I'm I have that same desire and feeling of like, if there's one or two people out there that genuinely want to try to approach the community, and it doesn't even have to be the Hmong community. Somebody out there might be hearing the concepts I'm sharing and say, wait, hold on. How do we like parallel that to the Black community? Is there a cultural lens or a cultural heritage that we have many generations in the Black community, the African community, that we can bring back to connect us back to the mother tree, right? Or how do we do that in the Hispanic community or whatnot, right? Other cultures. So I'm happy to have those conversations, because if we can do that more, if there's interested people that want to try to do um, something a little bit out of the box, but it's also connected to evidence-based practice. I'm happy to have those conversations with you, because the more of us, the merrier at this point.
Awesome. Thank you for being a guest on the Cultural Providers Network podcast. Episode. I feel like I threw too many big questions at you. We got to break some
All
of
right.
those and dive a little deeper. So again, thanks for being on the podcast, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Take care.
All right.